Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to the Think and Grow Rich Mastermind Show. My name is Dr. Peter A. James, and I want to welcome you to another edition of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And of course, we as the host, our angels as the hosts, are going to dive into this text today with a special guest who's going to identify how imagination has played out in her life. Imagination, of course, is the chapter which we're diving on into in Think and Grow Rich, chapter 5 of this infamous text. If you have never picked up a copy of Think and Grow Rich, we'll make sure to include a copy in the links today, but you got to do it. You got to do it. I'm so excited to be here. Another day, another opportunity for us to identify how this book has materialized in our life. And imagination is the chapter, of course, today that we're going to dive on into. And let's just face it, we all need a level of imagination. We all need to be able to dream, to have visions, to have an understanding of what we want to accomplish. Many of us, our dreams and our visions get squashed. Anne McNeil, right? And I'm going to bring Anne McNeil in this morning because we were having a very short conversation how sometimes our dreams and our visions get squashed, our imagination gets squashed. And now let's figure out how we can materialize it, open it back up. Anne McNeil, good morning to you. How are you doing?
Peter, listen, if I were any better, sir, I would be you. And so I'm very excited to put this creative imagination to work, utilizing synthetic imagination and all of its properties, starting with the fantabulous desire. So I'm excited this morning to get this party started.
And we started off this morning. We touched a little bit about you have a great speech you're going to be delivering today, and you had
Yes.
mentioned something about dreams and visions and how sometimes we let those dreams and visions escape us, especially as we get older and circumstances come into our lives. Do you mind diving into a little bit about how imagination, why imagination is important for us all?
Absolutely, absolutely. First of all, we were sharing about the fact that I am hosting today from Barry University in Miami, where I'm giving the commencement speech right after this podcast. And I refuse to use that speech as an excuse for why I could not show up today. But Peter and I were talking before the podcast started this morning about, he asked the question, what are you going to talk about? I said, you must have a dream in order to have a dream come true, is the topic of my conversation with the students today. And then I began to share with Peter how we allow our dreams and our hopes and our aspirations to be stolen by friends, problems, challenges, you know, that boo, that significant other, two kids and a job. And all of a sudden, the dreams start to dissipate. But if we are mindful, if you will, about the power of an idea that will pull you through, then the imagination is able to go to work. So you may say, how do I use that imagination? Which one is it? Is it the creative imagination that you use? That inspiration you get from within or without, but something that is totally yours that you are able to create from the spirit or wherever you get that hunch, that nudge, that inspiration from? Or is it the synthetic imagination where you take one idea and you mix it with another idea, like we're going to discuss today in some of the chapters and the stories? And then you mix those ideas together, and that forms in your imagination what is called synthetic imagination, where you take a multiple of ideas and you come up with a third. And one of the great ones I like to use as an example, Peter, is when you think about Cirque du Soleil, where they take ballet and they take the circus, two ideas, and they create what? Another idea. It's a high-end ballet costs probably 1,000 times more. But that's just another example, Peter, of taking an idea. And this is what my message is to the students today, because we all, whether it's undergraduate, graduate, or some other higher degree or no degree, we all are born and we manifest these ideas. But if we are able to learn, how do you take those ideas, Peter, to the next step? And that's
Mhm.
why I think it's so important that the fact that we each must have a dream in order to have a dream come true. And that's how I do that.
Yeah, I love that conversation. I love the idea, the concept of us. It's necessary for us to be able to have a strong imagination to kind of push us forward, right? And I did a similar speech a couple of weeks ago. I talked about choice. Interestingly enough, yesterday I had a client and we had a session, and he made a comment during the session. He said, I don't have a choice in this matter. And I paused him right there because that's cataclysmic for me, because we in our minds, in our lives, we identify areas, spaces where we have no choice whatsoever. We tell that to ourselves. In page 98 of Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill says, the only limitation is that which one sets up in one's own mind. I hope everyone heard that. I'll say that again. The only limitation is that which one sets up in one's own mind. What are some of the limitations that and maybe because of circumstance, that you are allowing to become a reality in your life right now? Those of you who are watching right now, what does that look like for you? Right? So this is just a sneak peek of what we're going to be talking about today. We have a very special guest, Dr. Karla Manning, who we're going to bring in just a short minute. But Ann McNeil, before we do that, I was hoping that you could roll the red carpet out for this video that we have that talks about these principles in Napoleon Hill's phenomenal book.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I want each of our listeners, no matter when you're listening to this, I want you to think about what is it that drives you? And if that is a desire, then what do you do next? And then what do you do after that? And then what do you do after that? Well, Napoleon Hill gives us 13 steps. He gives us 13 principles. He gives us 13 ideas of what you can do to achieve your life dreams, your goals, and your aspirations. So join us as we walk through the 13 steps and the 13 principles of Napoleon Hill's philosophy in Think and Grow Rich. Listen in.
Number 1 is desire. Napoleon Hill said that everything starts with a burning desire, a compelling reason for doing what it is we do. Step 2 is faith, having belief in our ability to attain that which we desire. Step 3 is what we call autosuggestion. Autosuggestion simply means being very intentional about the things that we are pouring into our thoughts, into our brains, and into our consciousness. Our brains, our minds will receive everything automatically, but we have to work extra hard to make sure that the positive things are what we are feeding ourselves, because those positive thoughts are going to turn into positive actions. Step number 4 is specialized knowledge. No one person knows everything, even about whatever their particular area of expertise might be. And the value of the mastermind principle is using the specialized knowledge of other people. Step number 5 is imagination, the workshop of the mind. Everything starts with our imagination and our thoughts, the burning desire to transform those thoughts into our reality. In order to do that, we have to take a look at step 6, which is organized planning. That is how we crystallize our desire into action, organizing ourselves. Having the thought and not acting on the thought isn't going to get us anywhere. We have the thought, we go through the organized planning to transform that thought into action. Step number 7 is decision. What Napoleon Hill said is the mastery of procrastination. Napoleon Hill said that the antidote to procrastination is simply to make a decision and then move on that decision. Step 8 is persistence. We have to have a sustained effort which is induced by our faith in order to achieve our goals. One of Napoleon Hill's books I love, even the title, 3 Feet from Gold. Those people who became rich during the gold rush in the Wild Wild West days didn't do that because they were necessarily smarter or had better information than anyone else. It's because they stayed just a little bit longer. Sometimes people left when they were just literally 3 feet from gold. So hanging in there, being persistent, is step number 8. Step number 9, the power of the mastermind, the driving force. None of us can accomplish anything on our own. Everybody, I don't care who you are, from the most prominent person to the person who might be considered the lowest on the totem pole, everybody has someone who helped them get to where they are. And the power of the mastermind is being able to use those influences around us, use the thoughts, use the knowledge, use the exploration of other people to help us in achieving our goal. Step number 10, the mystery of sex transmutation. This title can be a little confusing, but essentially what the mystery of sex transmutation means is that we oftentimes in our society think of sex as being purely physical. It is absolutely physical, but what Napoleon Hill teaches us is that sex also has an emotional element, and that sex is the strongest of our desires. That if we can take our sexual energy, transform that into positive, creative influences, it can propel us to new heights. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about the mystery of Step 10, which is sex transmutation. Step number 11 is the subconscious mind, which Napoleon Hill tells us is the connecting leap between our human mind and the infinite intelligence, the source of all thought, the source of all creativity. Conscious mind, we spent some time talking about how we use that through the influence of autosuggestion and what we're feeding into our mind. Step number 12, which is the brain, the broadcasting and receiving station of thought. Final step number 13, the sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom. This is the final step through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from or demands by the individual. The principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And I love how early as we're diving into this chapter, Think and Grow Rich, imagination chapter, excuse me. I love how you mentioned how creative we as human beings can get. And oftentimes when we think creativity, we're thinking of novel, new ideas that no one has ever thought of. But you mentioned Cirque du Soleil and the bringing of the ballet mixed with the circus. I think of Uber and Lyft that brought the taxi with and joined it with the app and made what we know all so well today. And imagination needs to be a part, this creative imagination needs to become a part of our life, is a part of our lives. Oftentimes, we just don't tap into it enough. We don't tap into it enough. And I want to acknowledge before I dive into our special guest, Dr. Karla, this morning, I want to acknowledge our folks who are joining us on the chat today. I see Galen Bingham. We miss you, Galen. Good morning to you. Hope you are doing well. We see Renette. Renette, good morning to you as well. We see Doretha, as always. Doretha, Dr. Raquel, I see you also. Who else am I missing? Good stuff. Thank you so much. Come bring in your questions, bring in your thoughts, bring in your comments. But without further ado, allow me to introduce a little bit Dr. Karla Manning. Dr. Karla is an educational equity consultant who helps educators and leaders and school leaders strengthen their diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Love to talk to her some more in depth about her DEI work. She has a PhD in curriculum and instruction, a multicultural teacher education from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a master's degree in curriculum and instruction from the Concordia University of Chicago, and a bachelor's degree in English education from Tennessee State University. She has 13 years of teaching experience in all grades, K-12, higher education, and even international teaching as a volunteer English teacher in South Africa. She hosts the Equity Experience podcast, an audio space for K-12 educators and school leaders who are dedicated to pursuing equity and inclusion in their schools, districts, and in their organizations. We'll have to definitely make sure she shares with us how we can watch her podcast. But without further ado, Dr. Karla, good morning to you. How are you doing today?
Good morning, everyone. I am well. Thank you all for having me.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Know you are a busy woman. You have a busy life around you for sure. But let's start out by hearing a little bit about your past, if you don't mind, just how you got to where you are. Sure, I read your bio a little bit, but we would love to hear your inside story about how you have become who you have become.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's funny that we're having this topic about imagination, because imagination has certainly gotten me one of the things that I've used to help me get to where I am today. So, but I'll unpack that shortly. But I am originally from Chicago. I always like to say I'm always an educator. Even though I don't teach in the classroom at the moment, I'm always an educator. But I was born and raised here in Chicago by a single mother who always instilled in me the power of self-belief, positive thinking, perseverance, and all of that. I decided to go to a historically black college for undergrad, so I was there for 5 years. Graduated with a degree in English. Moved back to Chicago to actually work with the then Senator Obama when he was a senator in Chicago as a volunteer intern. Started teaching. Have a master's in curriculum and instruction, and then a PhD in curriculum and instruction as well. After the PhD, I moved to New York City to accept a university teaching position in the CUNY system. And it was there where I realized I wanted to start my own consulting business. The thought of starting a consulting business in DEI started when I was in a doctoral program. But when I was in New York, that's where I would say it really began to manifest and take shape. Just because I think some of it too is just because I was in New York. New York is just that sort of environment. So since then, or where I am today, I've resigned from my position at the university, and I currently work full time for my company, the Equity Leadership Group, where I partner with other consultants and coaches to do this work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as anti-racism work and culturally responsive education work. So that is my life. And as you mentioned, I also have a podcast, the Equity Experience Podcast. It's an audio only podcast. It's not video at the moment, but it is an audio podcast where I have conversations with other educators or advocates of DEI, and where we unpack some topics in dialogue. So I'm currently in Chicago, and I enjoy roller skating in my free time. I enjoy yoga, green smoothies, and of course, I definitely enjoy transitioning into this new role as a mother. So I have a 2-year-old daughter who has really been a tremendous source of inspiration for me these past 2 years. So that's a little bit about me and who I am.
Good stuff. Good stuff. You're delayed just a little bit, but we are hearing you just fine for sure. And I know that 2-year-old is a big part of your life, and we may see a glimpse of her a little bit later on. But I would, I'm going to start out with my questioning. I'm here in Chicago with you in the local area, and one of the things that I know about being a college professor, oftentimes we as professors, the imagination part of it, this conversation that we're talking about, is not instilled in our students because we're so focused on teaching the outcomes, the objectives, the textbook that we're provided for the benefit of the students. It sounds like you've stepped out of that realm and experienced more of your imagination. Talk to us a little bit about what that transition, what it was like in the university system. I know CUNY well, and then stepping out into your own. How did imagination play into that for you?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, imagination was the driving force. I mean, it was really You know, I heard a quote by Steve Harvey, and he says that imagination is where God lives. And I never forgot that. I thought that was so powerful. And ever since I heard that quote, I never forgot that, because I decided to use that to help me to create the life that I want to live. In the university level, you know, first of all, the university level has helped me tremendously. So I don't mean to to I don't mean to you know, negativity. But you give me enough time and space to really be free with my ideas. The university level writ large is a very conservative space, especially in America. I mean, you have some universities that are sort of radical and progressive, some, but the majority of universities, especially your top tier, like Research One universities, are pretty conservative and are not always open to new ideas and new changes of thought. And I noticed that I picked up on that even in the PhD program. So I knew even when I was in the doctoral program that I was not going to stay in academia long. But for me to start my own business, that was all my imagination. I had to see myself doing something differently than what I was doing in the university classroom. I had to just see it differently. And I had to start with my imagination. I had to see it in my mind first. And I always say that I had to see this in my mind first. I like to go roller skating. And sometimes people say, well, how did you do that? How did you do that? And I said, well, you have to see it in your mind first. If you don't see it upstairs, it's not going to happen in the material realm. And so I applied that same principle with transitioning from university life to entrepreneurship. I wanted to see myself working with superintendents. I wanted to see myself doing these trainings. I wanted to see myself, you know, creating my own invoices and signing off on my own paperwork. I wanted to see myself doing that. And I just did not have that sort of opportunity in the university space. That those opportunities just were not there. And as a matter of fact, not only were those opportunities not there, I would say they were sort of shut down even when I presented the opportunities to people who I thought could help and support me. I was actually shut down. So it's not that those opportunities were not present. They were not invited to be present. So I had to figure out what worked for me and what worked for my goals and my dreams. And I just knew that at some point I had to leave the faculty life in order for me to pursue the life as a DEI consultant and a business owner full time. I had to make that transition for myself.
Good stuff. Ann McNeil, you know a lot about transitions. I want to bring you into this conversation.
Listen, as you were talking, one of the things that came up for me is the fact that we have to use our creative imagination and some synthetic imagination to leave that job and walk by faith. That's an imagination, and not by sight. That's an imagination to know that it's going to all be all right. But my question for you is, share with us your first experience with this book, this philosophy, this principle. What was your first encounter, if you will? How did you come about it? Did somebody give you the book, or you just downloaded it? How did that happen?
How did I first come across the book?
Yes,
Grow Rich book?
yes, yes.
I have a different. Someone sent me a nice a nice copy of it. I'm trying to think how I first came across this book. Oh, I know how. So I like to watch a lot of like motivation, you know, personal development videos. And what's the guy's name? He was on The Secret. Bob Proctor.
Proctor, yes.
Bob Proctor. And I was watching one of his videos and I heard him mention Think and Grow Rich. And I had never heard of Think and Grow Rich, didn't know anything about it, but he spoke very highly about the book. And so that was my first introduction. And so what I did, I started to listen to the audiobook on YouTube, and then I purchased a copy. And then over time, it's a book that never goes out. Like people are always referencing the book. And then I also was intrigued by Dennis Kimbrough. Dennis Kimbrough's the
version, right?
Right. Where he interviewed, I think, different Black-owned business owners,
Yes,
speak to them
correct.
about how they applied these principles. So that was another motivating factor. And then, and I'm going to also be very transparent.
Yes.
I worked with Galen, who I know who's on, and I worked with him as a leadership coachee. He was my coach.
Okay.
And Miss Ann, he spoke very highly of you. That's how I came across you, seriously. And at the end of our coaching sessions, we started to talk a little bit about this book. And he says, well, I'm going to be honest with you, Karla. He said, one of my mentors, Miss Ann McNeil, he told me, he said that one of the things that you do is that when you work with your team, your staff, that you have them read this book, you do trainings, you do workshops, and you really pour these principles of this book into your team, into your staff. And even when he said that, I said, I have to meet this lady. I need to get in contact with her to learn from her. But I thought that was an important concept to not only embody the principles for yourself, but if you know that you have a team of people working with you, to have them having that same mindset. So the book, I would say I came across, I would say maybe in 2017, right when I moved to New York City. And ever since then, it's been a staple in my life for sure.
Well, as we can see, your coach has a question for you. And his question is, what role does courage play in expressing imagination? And that's from the leadership coach,
Yep,
Mr. Galen Bingham.
absolutely.
So if you can share that experience.
Sure. Yeah, that's an excellent question. And one of my affirmations that I like to say to myself is that I have the courage to pursue my dreams and make my goals a reality. I have the courage. And that is such an important question because stepping out on faith, using your imagination, having the ability to see something that is not there takes a tremendous amount of courage. A tremendous. This is not for the weak of heart. You have to be able, in your heart of hearts, to know something and believe something that you physically cannot see. And I would also say that it even takes courage even to be yourself, even in these moments, because people may say, I don't want to use deficit language, but people may say, oh, you're crazy. You're making the wrong decision. You have a 2-year-old. You need full-time benefits and health insurance coverage. What are you doing? But it takes a tremendous amount of courage to be able to believe in your own dreams, have your own faith, know that what you're doing is the right thing for you, even amidst not even just naysayers, but people who may not share the same vision, people who may not understand your vision. They may not even necessarily be naysayers, but they just may not hold the vision that you hold. So it takes a tremendous amount of courage to still be able to believe in yourself, get up every day, be disciplined enough to get up every day and pursue your goals, and to work for something that may not have even physically manifested. And that's why I say that one of my affirmations, I have the courage to make my goals and dreams a reality. I have the courage to do that. And I always like to say too on the Wizard of Oz, or my favorite rendition, The Wiz, you had the brain, you had the heart, but you needed the courage. That the character who represented the courage was tremendous. It's one thing to think it and to feel it, but you have to have the courage to actualize it. So I love that question. And it's something that I have to be intentional about in terms of having courage, because it's easy to get sidetracked. It's easy to not believe in yourself, but you have to have the courage to see that and believe it and live it every day. Excellent question, Galen.
So here's a quiz question for you all. For those of you who know The Wiz, so who represented the courage on The Wiz? Who was that actor, Ann McNeil?
I don't know. I don't know.
I want to say Nipsey Russell, but that was the Tin Man.
I think it was Nipsey Russell, but we're not going to get off track. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure.
Google it.
I thought right away of The Wiz. For those of you who are too young to know what we're talking about, it's important that you go back and watch The Wiz. I
want to give a high five, Peter, to Marquita Miller, who says, I have the courage to make my goal and dreams a reality. And Marquita, thank you for chiming in from Black NSA and so many other worlds that we're all in together. It is definitely courage. And actually, Napoleon Hill does a phenomenal job on this whole idea of courage and character and how tied they are because they build on each other. But I keep coming back every single week to the first principle, which is desire. Because if your desire, Dr. Karla, Marquita, and all of you listening, Beverly, everybody, Shantae, all of you, if your desire is not strong enough, are you willing? Are you willing to pull through with courage and character building exercises called defeat, called failure? You know, we talk about the food of champions and all of that, but when you're in the ring and you're getting knocked down by life, can't pay my bills, you know, my car was repossessed. That's what happened to Dennis Kimbrough on that journey. You know, car was repossessed, losing the house, all of those things. And Napoleon Hill said to him the same thing. Carnegie said to him, I'm not going to pay your dime. Will you take? Yes, that's the backstory on that. And so when we talk about the power of the imagination, this is when it comes into play. And so, Dr. Karla, can you share with us one experience when you question your imagination about an idea that you had, and you question whether or not it would work? Now, before you answer that question, share with us if it was either synthetic, which was some ideas that you put together, or if it was a creative idea, something you downloaded from the universe that was all yours, maybe a journaling thought or inspiration or hunch. Can you share with us one of those and how you pushed through with that imagination idea?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I guess I can say I'll start with launching a business. I'll start with that because I think that's one of the greatest examples of how a person can see something and manifest something that is physically not there yet.
So was that a synthetic or a creative idea?
Let me see. I'm referring. I'm in my book right now, looking up these definitions.
So just for our listeners, right? We're going to go back to what the author says, the difference between the two. The author says that if you take, and we talked about it before the show started, really, I used an example of Cirque du Soleil, where that's an example of a synthetic imagination idea, which is two different ideas. One is the circus, one is ballet. And the founder of this idea merged the two ideas together, and he created a third idea, which was Cirque du Soleil, right? Now, creative imagination, an idea for creative imagination is something that is a hunch. It's an inspiration that you received, kind of like downloaded. And I'll use an example from the book, like Coca-Cola, right? Something that you received an inspiration, and you can choose either one. There's no right or wrong answer, right?
Okay, sure. I'm going to say I don't know. I'm going to say probably actually synthetic, even though I don't know if I want to align myself with too many things that are synthetic. But anyway, looking at the definition, it says through this faculty, one may arrange old concepts, ideas, or plans into new combinations. This faculty creates nothing. Even though with my business, I created a business, theoretically, I guess, and conceptually, what I'm doing is not new. I mean, people have started consulting businesses for eons, you know, particularly within the field that I'm in, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those consulting and coaching businesses have been around maybe even since the 80s. Right. So these are not, you know, this idea that I had was not a new idea. It was new for me, certainly, new for my environment and my family, but just the idea or the thought in itself was not new. So I would say the synthetic imagination is what probably the specific principle that I was using.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much.
Mhm.
Dr. Peter?
So I love how Dr. Carla had mentioned early on about her affirmations and even how that plays a big role in her life,
Mhm.
or has played and is playing a big role in her life. I got to refer back to this imagination chapter where Napoleon Hill kind of supports that. It says, God seems to throw himself on the side of people who know exactly what they want if they are just determined to get just that, right? And of course, Anne McNeil mentioned the desire, the will that needs to play into our lives as we're pressing forward. So all of you who are listening, all of you who are watching, it's so important to identify, what does this imagination look like, whether it's synthetic or creative? What might it look like in your life? And
Mm.
how are you going to ensure that it's coming to fruition? What are you putting in place? What is your will and your desire? And Anne McNeil, I'm a big proponent of the fact that we need to have the right people around us, that we need to have a mastermind of sorts to be able to strengthen our will, strengthen our desire as we continue to move forward. I know you're an expert in that area. I know you lead those types of masterminds. Can you tell us a little bit about some accountability, some mastermind that you have in your life?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I want to go to something that Renette Gordon has in the chat as I tee that up, if you
Mhm.
will. And she says, yes, we need to see success in our mind first before it is manifested. We must see it in our minds first before it is manifested. And and then she goes on to say synthetic imagination, combining ideas versus creative imagination. And the entire idea of masterminding this philosophy, taking all 13 principles and bringing them together, is a synthetic creative imagination idea that God allowed me through creative imagination to download years ago. Because in 1979, when I started reading the book, and then when we got into the 80s and started my first mastermind group, and then we got into the 90s and realized that we had something here that was a gift that others could benefit from, then we had to learn, how do you share this gift? And the International Mastermind Association was born out of that. But utilizing the synthetic, or go back to again, synthetic imagination, I envisioned a world whereby masterminders of all kind can come together and bring best practices together to help support each other. So what is a mastermind group? And how do you use this idea of imagination to bounce ideas off of each other to help support each other? But I'd like to challenge all of you to join us every Friday as we walk through the book. You can go to the Eventbrite or our website at internationalmasterminders.com, and you can join us every Friday as we walk through, wherever you are in the book, this philosophy. But also, if you are interested in having a conversation about the best practices of masterminding and talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly, yes, of masterminding, we host a beta test every month called, and you can go to our website again at internationalmasterminders.com/group mastermind. Again, that's internationalmasterminders.com/group mastermind, and register to join us once a month on a Tuesday. The details are on the site. And we actually are going to be blessed with Chris McCarron and Doretha Dennis at our next meeting, sharing some of the best practices they're using in their mastermind group. Now, Peter, I can also go into our annual meeting if you want me to do that now, or we can wait, because I think all of these things are tied
Yeah.
together when you talk about synthetic imagination, creative imagination. But how do you, each of you are listening to this, how do you go to the next level? And Dr. Karla, we're going to come back to you because, again, I think you shared something early on when I asked you about the book. You actually walked from Bob Proctor to Bob Proctor to Galen to me, to now you're on the podcast, right? There are millions of people who have ideas, but they don't know what to do next.
Mm.
And we have, I think, a responsibility to share best practices, our stories, our fears, our failures, to help others with their future. Because I don't believe that these situations were given only to us to sit, but I think they were given to us to share. So if you are interested in having a better quality of life, join us for every area of your life, January 2023, in Boca Raton, Florida, January 6th through the 7th, 2023, in Boca Raton at the Embassy Suites. You can go to our website at internationalmasterminders.com and register. But what I would challenge all of you to do is this: journal your thoughts. Allow the creative imagination to come through you. Every idea you have, if you could just get up just a little earlier, Dr. Karla, just a little earlier, Peter, Beverly, all of you listening, Galen, just a little. I know some of you on the East Coast, some of you West Coast, some of you Central, wherever you are. The question was asked in the chat: how do you tap into this creative imagination? I'll just say for myself, that's one of the ways I tap into my creative imagination. And now I'll go to you, Dr. Karla. Can you share with our listeners, how do you tap into your creative imagination, these hunches, these inspirations that you get? How do you tap into that? And then what do you do next with it?
Absolutely, absolutely. So one thing I would say is, I think the first thing to always keep in mind is the mindset. So I always have to be intentional about my mindset. And sometimes I feel when my mindset is off, when I'm not thinking the right way or thinking productively. So that's the first thing, is I think we always have to be intentional about our mindset, be intentional about our thoughts. If we feel that we're not thinking correctly, we have to be strategic to work on our mindset. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is we have to write these hunches down. We have to write them down. And I love listening to Steve Harvey in terms of motivation. He's not my go-to, but I will say that his thoughts around self-improvement and personal improvement have helped me. I will say that. And one of the things that a strategy that he talked about and that I started to do, I would like to share. And he says to just have a notebook and just start writing down. He says, try to go up to 300 where you're just writing down ideas about the life that you want to live. Any sort of goal that you have, any dream that you have, any aspiration that you have, write it down and see. And he says, give yourself like 12 months and see within 12 months how many of those things have come true. So that's the second thing I would say, is to write it down. And then even with that, we have to continue to put it in our minds. So not only write it down, but read it to yourself every day. So I have my goals written down, my business goals for this year. I have them hanging up in my office and then in a downstairs lounge area, chill area. And every day I read those goals to myself every day. I try to do it multiple times a day so that the goals become implanted in my mind as my own truth. And then I would say another thing, which I have to work on, I have to be honest, is the visualization piece. So creating some sort of visual images that resonate with the ideas that you have. So, I mean, we can say vision board, for example, but sometimes when I see people's vision boards, it's too much text. And I'm like, it has to be visual. People got words and phrases and paragraphs on a vision board. But I feel that a vision board should be more visual, should be more images. And so I would say to even have a vision board that's just strictly visual, just images, but the images resonate and they align with the goals and inspirations that you have for yourself. And look at it. Look at the vision board every day so that image becomes a planted visual in your mind. And then I like what Beverly says here: own your own truth. I think that's a huge element of it as well. You know, we have to be able to know what works for us, see what works for us, and believe it. Believe it. One of the things I remember, I was on the train ride and I had my Think and Grow Rich book, and some of the statements in this book are so powerful that we can even turn these into affirmations. And some of the affirmations that I've derived from this book focus on belief, imagination, and visualization. And so those are three areas that I always feel that I have to work on constantly for myself. But those are some of my own best practices in terms of owning the inspirations and inspirational hunches that come to me. Those are some of the things that I like to do within my own life.
Powerful, 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 powerful. Thank you so very much. Wow.
Absolutely.
Yes, 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 yes. And Dr. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, we're getting close to our time here there, Ann McNeil. It's been phenomenal diving on into Dr. Karla's her path, her history, and even where she's wanting to go, how she's using imagination in her life right now, but also into the future. As we draw to our close a little bit, I want to allow us to be able to share with our audience how, Dr. Karla, we can get in touch with you. We'll start with Ann McNeil. And what are some aha moments for you today, whether it's about the accountability, whether it's about the imagination, whether it's about something that's in preparation for your speech today, whatever the case may be, maybe it's even something from our audience that has put some things in the chat. What has arisen to the surface for you?
I would say, you know, the title of my commencement speech for today here at Barry University, that you must have a dream to have a dream come true. And then to hear you, Dr. Karla, talk about Steve Harvey, one of my favorites. And for those who are in my Clarity Mastermind, we talk about, you know, the self-confidence formula. We talk about the 30-day test. We talk about the scrolls. But what I don't talk about is the additional people that I listen to every morning. And Steve Harvey is one of those, along with Jim Rohn. And when you talked about his list of 300 or 365, whatever the number was, it reminded me and resonated so deeply with me, because that is the actualization for the dream. Mm-hmm. You see, because what he's doing is he's downloading into the listener of how do you actually identify that bucket list? How do you actually identify those specific dreams? And one of the things that I like to do when I do that is I like to categorize the dreams in spiritual, financial, family, health, education, business, career, recreation, creativity, civic, and then begin to take that 300, if you will, and determine whether or not they're long range goals, you know, 3 to 5, are they short range goals, 6 months to 12. And so when you break that down to the next level, I mean, that's what resonates. I could go on if you could tell. This is so exciting. You have been such a phenomenal guest. But I will also say this to everybody listening. Every single one of us has an excuse. The devil made me do it. The devil made me not do it. And Dr. Karla, you remember the conversation we had before the podcast started? It's almost time to go. So you know where I'm going with this, right?
I know.
Okay. Prayer works. I've prayed over that spirit. Okay. And the devil didn't want this energy in the atmosphere, because you are blessing so many people who are yet unborn. Let me say that again. You see, this podcast is evergreen. There will be people listening to this, and we will no longer be on this earth.
Have mercy.
Come on, somebody. And so when you think about your imagination, each of you that's listening, when you think about the power of your imagination and the gift that are given to each of us called ideas, and you sit on them, you sit. And we've heard, whether it's Les Brown or anybody, talk about when death comes and you're lying on your deathbed and all these ideas, creative or synthetic, standing around your deathbed, and they're saying to you, Dr. Karla, Dr. Peter, Galen, Beverly, we only came to you. Only you could have given us life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we must all die with you forever.
Yeah.
So that's what resonates with me. And you can tell I'm very excited right about now. So I'm going to turn it back over to the two of you. But if you are interested in having a better quality of life in every area of your life, you can connect with me by going to annmcneil.com/coaching, and we can have a conversation. If you're not, then you can just text me at you can text me at 55678 55678. Just text that number, and in the chat, just put the word ANN, and I can send you some information to help you out. But if you're interested in having a better quality of life in every area of your life, utilizing these principles, then we can have a conversation. All right, Dr. Peter.
Can I add something?
Please.
Yes.
Yeah.
And excellent. You know, and I want to say something, and I just had an experience. And I think the imagination piece is something that is universal, is you know, sort of transcendental. Even before I came across this book, another example that I have where I use my imagination. I was in undergrad at Tennessee State, and I was going for my teaching license. You know, you have to take these exams in order to be certified to teach. Well, one of the exams that I took, the first time I took it, I failed it. I didn't pass. And I was devastated. Like, I was set to graduate. I was on a timeline, and I just was not anticipating not passing this exam. And there were two exams. I passed one and failed the other. So the one that I failed, I was sort of on a timeline to hurry up and pass it. And I was nervous. All this anxiety and everything was coming up. And I would say maybe about a week, maybe 2 weeks before the scheduled date, what I just started to do was just visualize and imagine myself passing this exam. And no one had even told me about these concepts. I had never heard about the book. I was not even aligned with that way of thinking, with the metaphysical thinking and law of attraction, you know, nothing like that. But something that just a spirit inside of me told me to just sit down, Karla, rest your mind, be still, and just see what it is that you want. And I remember doing that. I remember just sitting down, closing my eyes, and I remember seeing myself you know, taking the exam, but doing it calmly, not with all of this anxiety and nervousness. I saw myself looking at a letter, and the letter saying, "Congratulations, Karla, you passed the exam and you set to receive your certification." I just imagined myself seeing those things. Again, no one told me that, but that's what I wanted. That's the reality that I wanted for myself. So I felt that I had to see myself doing it and engaging in those actions even before it manifested. And I did that. I just manifested on that visualization every day to help me to remove those anxieties. And sure enough, you know, when the test time came, I was not, you know, I probably had a little bit of anxiety, but not as much. And sure enough, about a month, maybe 2 months later, I received a letter saying that I had passed the exam. Now, you all, for full transparency, I just passed, right? Like, you had to have a 150, and I had like a 150. So whatever the score was, the passing score that was needed, I just received a passing score. But that was all of the confirmation that I needed. And ever since then, that was in 2006, 2007. Ever since then, it's just been on and popping ever since. As I like to say, it's been on and popping ever since. So I would encourage all of us to use our imagination and visualization to our benefit, to our advantage. Yeah. Use it to our advantage. It is available to all of us. And let's use it to our advantage to help us create the life I want to live. And Miss Ann, you know I'm signing up for your program, so I'll be in contact with you. This is not the first and last time you're gonna hear from me, Miss Ann. So just so you know.
Speak. Thank you, Galen. Thank you, Peter. All right,
Dr. Karla, how do we stay in touch with you? How does our audience stay in touch with you as we move forward?
Absolutely. And I would love to stay connected with people. I love to network and meet new people. Feel free to go to my website, you all, www.equityleadershipgroup.com. At one time, that name was just a figment of my imagination. Now it is my reality. Equityleadershipgroup.com is my website. We can schedule some time to talk there. I'm also very much on LinkedIn. If you just Google or put in my name on LinkedIn, that's fine. People can also email me, Karla with a K, Karla at equityleadershipgroup.com, Karla at equityleadershipgroup.com. You can contact me on my business cell, business, 646-956-7043, 646-956-7043. You can also check me out on my podcast, the Equity Experience Podcast, where I have conversations about race, diversity, and education. Equity Leadership Group. Don't forget the group, you all, respectfully. Group, equityleadershipgroup.com. And then I'm also working on my first book. Another thing that was at one point in time just a figment of my imagination that is now becoming a reality. So I am in the process of working on my first book, which will be released by the Center for Responsive Schools next year. So I'm so grateful to have been here with you all and with your audience today. I look forward to learning and growing, and I look forward to networking with you all. Peace and blessings to everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today. And as we finish up today, there's many of us who are sometimes our imagination, whether it's creative or synthetic, we allow it to be squashed. We allow it to be curtailed because of our circumstances, our environment sometimes. I encourage you all that the only thing that gets in the way of you and your imaginations is you. So how can you open yourself up to ensure to dive on into this vision, dive on into your dream, dive on into your imagination as you move forward. Ensure that it is a major part of your life each and every day. And I'd love for you to continue to join us here every Saturday morning, Think and Grow Rich Mastermind Live. My name is Dr. Peter A. James. So excited that you were able to chime in and listen. You can find me on any social media platform at Dr. Peter A. James, at DrPeterAJames, or at shiftyourmindset.com. Thank you again, Dr. Karla, for being with us. And McNeil, congratulations and good luck today on your speech. And for those of you who are watching, make it a blessed day and a blessed week ahead of you. Take care.